Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joey, Lost Knowledge. My talk is So You Want to Work in Infosec. So I don't know if I'll teach you anything, but it'll definitely be entertaining. That's usually what I go for. So just the disclaimer, all views and opinions contained within this presentation are my own. They do not reflect the beliefs or opinions of my employer or any other affiliated organizations. I include that after being asked to do so a few presentations ago by a different employer. Fair warning, this presentation was designed to be part educational, part entertaining, and all interactive. So if you don't interact with me, we're going to be done really quick. We don't want to be done really quick. It's less fun. So just a little bit about me. Even though I live in the greater Nashville metro area now, I still identify as a Nova hacker. I spent 10 years living outside DC. There's a great organization of guys out there who meet every month. And so I love those guys, and in large part because of them. It's a big part of the reason why I'm where I'm at. I'm a dork. I'm a nerd. I love Star Wars, Star Trek, Legos. I smoke cigars. I drink bourbon. So I enjoy many things. Just a little bit about my background. So I've been working in information security for over 10 years now. I started in compliance. My current work is in penetration testing. From time to time, I've been tasked with doing some forensics work, some security research. So it's kind of gone all over the place, kind of depending on what was needed. Twice during that time, I've been a manager. Once is a very technical, hands-on manager. Second time, much more program management based. But during that time, I got to interview a lot of interesting people and a lot of people who wanted to work in cyber. Yeah, I know, I would drink, but it's early. So why did I do this talk? This is one of the reasons I did this talk. I'm going to hope like hell that you guys can hear this. So for those who don't live in the greater DC metro, you may have seen some commercials like this, but nowhere near as many as I saw on a daily basis. Play, I hit play, there we go.
Internet security is critical to us all.
Someone has to stop the bad guys.
Cyber is where the jobs are.
Secure your future. A degree in cybersecurity from University of Maryland University College can help. Our nationally recognized cybersecurity programs are taught by experts using real-world training, so you'll have the skills for both government and private sector career opportunities. Visit umuc.edu/cyb. That's umuc.edu/cyb.
And I don't know what a cyb is, but it sounds scarier than a cyber. So in the DC metro area, there's probably a dozen of those commercials, within a 1-hour program window. It's insane. If you watch, when I watch college football, every other commercial was like that. You would get the two universities playing commercial, and then you'd get a UMUC or some other school pitching cyber. And it was very frustrating because, as you could see, how much of that was realistic to anybody who's actually working in the field. Do we have giant rooms with 8,000 screens? That's more like an actual You
don't have this at home?
No, I don't. You do? Well, Dave, we don't all have the money that you do. But I'm sure Dave knows all the commercials I'm talking about. Yes, they are. And so what's great is if you want a good time is go YouTube video search for cyber degree commercials. There was one that's a minute and a half, so I didn't want to include in the talk, from the University of it's some weird Florida university. I don't think it was one of the big ones that I'd actually heard of. But it's a minute and a half, and you have these ominous hackers in a dark room, and then
with hoodies.
Yeah, with hoodies and all the really crappy stuff you see on the screen, oh yeah, we're this far into cracking the password and doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden they're no! And the guy who's I don't know, supposed to be their Russian overlord is oh, what happened? And they're they're good. And then you see some young woman sitting there yeah, we stopped them, typing. I'm what the hell just happened? That's not how this works. So you watch those, and yeah, you'll be geez, it's no wonder we have so many people in cyber. Cyber. So, so a couple more reasons why I did this talk. So the first is a meme that I created when I did another talk, but it very much epitomizes to me a lot of the salespeople who deal in our field, where they're always telling you have a problem and I've got the perfect product to fix it, and it seems like everyone has a product that's going to make us more secure. And then you look at headlines, right? The security fatigue one is one that was pretty recent within the last couple weeks. And what's kind of ironic is actually that's something I've already kind of referenced to other people before, is the biggest threat, I think, to our field is people just eventually realizing, well, everyone's going to have our shit anyway, so what do we care? Especially in an era where everybody gives all their information to groups freely. And then the one that's been persisting for probably a couple years now, which is, there's not enough cybersecurity people to do the work, and so now they're like, that's why there's everybody go get cyber jobs. So when I did this talk, I had a bit of a hypothesis. My first part of the hypothesis was that there are a lot of people entering the field for the wrong reasons. Like you see with the one commercial I already showed, they promise that there's lots of jobs out there for it. And the other thing they try to push is that there's lots of money in it. Thankfully, one of those schools, ITT, no longer exists. A lot of people don't understand what the scope is of what they're getting into. And so one of the things that I'm going to kind of get into in a bit is, what is cybersecurity, right? And information security. It's a very big field, right? Like, some people think of it as a small thing, but there's so many different groups within it. The second part of my hypothesis is that we're in a tech and a security bubble, specifically a security bubble more than anything. There's been all this push for cyber that everybody comes out with their products. People who never should have IPO'd. And yeah. So one of my favorite whipping boys, FireEye, they were a golden child, right? They IPO'd at 40, the stock shot through the roof up to 85, and where's it at today? It bottomed the F out. SecureWorks never should have IPO'd. That was Dell looking for money. They can say whatever the hell they want about it. That was Dell being like, let's spin this off, IPO it, and see if we can make money. And the stock never went anywhere, and based on all the estimates that Dell had for what they were going to make, all the reports are, it was a lot less. It IPO'd for well below what they wanted. Another good example is Norse Core. So bad was it that I actually, I was trying to work on the slide. I was like, what was the name of that company with the pew pew map? So I searched pew pew map, and Norse Core was the first hit. I mean, come on. If that is what I have to look up to find you, that's kind of sad. And then the last part is, I'm concerned that large parts of the industry are going to be commoditized. Some of them already have been, and anyone who thinks they haven't, talk to me later. And a lot more are heading that way. A lot of the risk and compliance stuff is all commoditized, right? If you have guys doing audits for risk and compliance, everyone and their mother does that, and they've raced to the floor to see who can do it cheaper and for less. Pen testing is slowly getting there. I know we like to argue it's not. There are some, and I was having this conversation with them the other day, I said, there are some small groups that will have their niche markets. So, yeah. And the reality is, you're still gonna have some organizations that people are gonna respect, and they're gonna want to use these small companies, these consulting firms that do the true hardcore pen tests that are gonna give you the real value you need, but there's still gonna be a lot, and almost everyone's really just gonna pay for the checkbox. And when it comes to trying to meet a checkbox, that's a race to the bottom. Which basically means that I need to get into management or I'm going to be out of a job. Thankfully, I'm an internal tester, so I don't have that problem. So what is cybersecurity? So I'm up to 2 drinks now. So these are just some of the categories. I'm not going to say they're all of them. These are the kind of the big ones from that I see and the people I interact with. Governance, risk, and compliance, which is particularly big if you're doing finance, medical, or government. Those 3 fields are so in love with governance and compliance. Security operations, that almost every company of a certain size should have some sort of operations, even if they're just using MSSPs. Security engineering, so in that case, I'm talking about like the architecture, the design, the actual like people who get stuck managing the appliances. The malware hunt teams, incident response, penetration testing, and like I said, there's so many more, and a lot of people work across these, right? My primary job now is pen testing, but I get roped into doing some of the security engineering. I've done incident response in my current job. So it kind of, research goes into this. Education, there is an education portion of this, right? Because we actually do have legitimate universities teaching legitimate skills, not just whatever UMEC says they're doing. So now we're going to get into my unscientific poll. So when the talk got picked up, I decided I wanted to kind of test my hypothesis and, ask some people questions and see what they had to say and try to gauge what I was seeing in the field from people. So the first question then I'm going to kind of ask here in the room is, how long have folks in the room worked in information security? If you worked in information security, let's say for, not at all, if you're just looking to get in the field now, can you raise your hands? Okay, so some of you are just getting in. How many people in here have been doing it for at least 5 years? Okay, 10 years? All right, anyone who's done 20? Of course, Dave, you're old. How long you been doing it, Dave? 22 years. Before most of us even knew what the hell cybersecurity or information security was. Yeah, and that's, yeah. Back then. Yeah. So, and that's just it, right? So it is very much a new birth field of sorts. But they were, system administrators, network administrators were doing a lot of the same stuff 20, 30 years ago that we're doing now. It just wasn't at the scale, right? I don't know how many people in here are old enough to remember, when the internet was just dial-up modems and, yeah. There's some of us, good. But, it was a lot less of a concern, I think, to people then than it is now because we weren't as connected then, right? So in my survey, I had people from a minimum of a year. I had one person who did 40 years, and if the person who put 40 years will contact me, yeah, it's a lying bastard. Unless it's Kahuna, I want to know who that is. Yes, and the average was 11 years. So I think I got a pretty good range. When I first started this, like the first couple responses, I was getting very leaning towards the high end. Thankfully, a lot of people kind of helped me reach out to younger people to get some more responses. So question 2, what was the highest level of education completed? So how many people in here don't have any college degree and are working in this field? So a couple of you, yeah. And how many actually went to college but never finished? Anybody? Okay. How many actually have an associate's or a bachelor's degree of some type? It doesn't matter if it's related or not, okay? Now, if you with your hands up, how many of your degrees are actually related to something, information security or networking or computers or, okay, a few. Anybody here have graduate's degrees in the same kind of arenas? Okay. And my response is, I was actually surprised with the number of graduate degrees. I'll be honest, I was. But it was kind of what I expected, right? I knew there was going to be a pretty decent percentage of folks who didn't have a tried and true degree. We see a lot of that, especially from people who've been in the field for a long time. A lot of people got into this, through systems administration, network administration, and kind of were, other IT areas and worked into this field. The other thing that I wasn't too surprised about is, was their degree actually related? And, 50% said either no or somewhat, right? And, I've run into a lot of friends who work in this field who have theater degrees. I've always joked, I was like, we have so many theater degrees, we should actually forget all these concerts. We should have musical productions when we go to conferences. There's only probably 24 of us that would enjoy it, but you know what? For the record, my degree is in electrical and computer engineering, so I blame my musical theater on my wife. So question 3 was basically what field do you work in? I think I got a pretty good mix. The one group I didn't seem to get a lot of, and maybe it's just because there's not a lot of them in general, is incident response. But otherwise, I thought it was a pretty good breakdown. I expected research to be a little lower just because there's not necessarily as much, usually as much demand and as much money to be had in just research. So I'll ask the question to the room. How many people who are actually working like GRC, like governance risk and compliance? Anybody? Okay. Security operations folks. Architects who actually bother with it. And I expect some people to raise their hands multiple times. I got some crap for this not being a multiple option answer, and I failed on that. And SurveyMonkey won't let me change it once there's responses.
Won't let you change the answers once you have
No,
it?
so once you get a response, SurveyMonkey won't let you change the way the question can be answered. So I wasn't able to go back and say, change this to allow multiples. So it was a failure on my part, but by the time I got around to realizing what a failure that was, I already had too many responses to, How many people in incident response? Anyone? No. Pen testers in the room? Anyone besides me? Couple? Okay. So, folks can go, if you've not done it yet, please feel free to do it. I'm actually doing, yeah. Yep.
Dave, come up here.
Right. Right. So
It's
Mr. Marcus asked. He said, what does this tell me? And I don't know if this. I'd be interested to find out if this actually matches to some correlation of where the jobs are. I've not. I guess the step to kind of correlate that would be look and see what, just go look at job postings in a couple areas and see what jobs are available, right? And then see, does that kind of match to this? I think there's definitely some preconceived notions about some of the areas. I'm sure everyone who works in these different fields loves their jobs. As somebody who worked in compliance, my idea of GRC is it's boring and I would never want to do it. For me, pen testing, incident response, research are the three areas I would probably ever consider. Like I said, I do some architect now, but as a full-time job, I think it'd get very repetitive for me. So I don't know, it's possible. And I did get a couple people who said, they do stuff across multiple areas. And I think that's a big part of the problem is, especially in smaller organizations, is they're trying to find, they don't have enough space for 4 or 5 people. And so they're trying to find one person who can do everything. What's bad about me screwing up this question is technically I do 3 or 4 of these on a semi-regular basis. So I should have known that better than to make it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right, exactly. And that's usually the big issue, right? Like in my current job, I'm the only pen tester, and we have enough work that we could probably have 3 or 4 on a pretty regular basis, but the reality is we don't have the money, right? So for us, it's more of a size versus an actual workload issue.
But doesn't this go back to your description earlier of a smaller company that gets brought in to do that kind of work?
Right, and so that's when it's like, okay, so then do you start just contracting some of that out, right? So, part of our organization, we have a security operations center, but we're too small to have 24/7 coverage. So we do use an MSSP to do the 24/7 monitoring of our external, of our edge, where our websites and all that stuff sits. But we're the only ones managing our internal. So it's one of those situations where we just don't have, there's no way to get the manpower, right? You want a 24/7 SOC, you need to have at least, I would say preferably between like 8 and 10 people.
Does it go back to having that wall of monitors? In other words, literally having enough people to man all of those. It's not just a show at that point, it actually is separate readouts.
Right, and that's really what it comes out to, right? You want to be able to have 24/7 coverage. If you're just looking at one network, it's hard to do, whereas that's where some of the MSSPs come in and do well, right? Is they've got they've got a team of people whose job, some of the really big ones, they've got a couple dozen people who are looking at like 4 dozen different companies, and when they see alerts and shit come in, they have notification chains to notify you something's going on. And so for them to do that at scale, have one person who may be watching 4 companies is significantly more cost effective for them than for a company to monitor their own network 24/7. And that's why some of those services work. And again, that's another one of those areas where I think it becomes largely commoditized, not just because it's a race to the bottom, but also because there's a lot of technology involved. So a lot of the big players like Dell SecureWorks, who basically do pro services also throw a box at you, right? So they can, these companies can basically get at you two different ways. And then you also sometimes get stuck with a product. Now it's like, well, our buy cycle is, for something like this is like 5 years. Well, now you're stuck for 5 years with that, even if their service sucks, right? So there's some of that going on. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about commoditization of some of the tools and some of the services and stuff like that. What do you think is the reticence of companies to use open source stuff? There's tons of that good stuff out there that, if you have a one-man shop, you can spin up, open source, ideas,
Right.
all that junk. And, but why do you think corporations
So,
have to go to these big companies that pay big bucks?
so the question was, why with all these great open source tools do people wind up going to these external companies? And I think the biggest reason a lot of times is those open source tools are great, and a lot of them work really well. A lot of them work really well, but yeah, but the issue I think is a lot of those things take care in feeding, right? There's a lot of stuff to keep up. If you're running an IDS that way, you have to manage the rules, you have to do that. Whereas if you've paid Cisco for firepower, which is just snort at this point, if you've got Fortinets and you're using their IDS solution.
Not just that, though. Care and feeding is a really good point, but it comes down to do you actually have the money to pay for these true analysts to look at your data?
Right.
Guarantee you pay an analyst who knows what those smart alerts actually may mean.
Right.
And how to chase them down versus just by going patch us.
Yep.
Because it comes down to, do you have the money to pay a real analyst to look at the data?
Yeah.
If you get an alert on your screen that says back orifice and it's coming from an IP address, you're going to think it's just a back orifice coming from an IP address. You don't know what that could actually mean,
Right.
what you have to relate it to. So a lot of times they're going to pay the company for the
Yep.
expertise they have in managing the event
Yeah.
and knowing the adversary, not just spinning up the box and checking the box.
Yeah. No, and that's another good point too. As Dave said, which is, getting that expertise and that knowledge. We've got, we've had some very junior analysts before, and they're doing a lot to learn and stuff. But at the same time, it's a lot of the time is chasing down, and they don't have the experience yet to be able to look at something. And I've seen analysts who can do this. They can look at it, spend 10 seconds looking at it, and know whether or not it's a false positive, right? And so there's that skill that comes along. So yeah, that's a good point. A lot of it's paying for the skill, because a lot of these people aren't cheap, right? Especially if they've got very specialized skills. It can be very costly to build a team of people who actually are very skilled at what they do.
Paying for headcount, paying for, as a service type thing. Depending on who you go with, you can pay somebody's salary for several years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen what some of these services cost nowadays, especially the good ones. You definitely, if somebody gives you, if you're ever out and part of your security job shopping for servers and somebody gives you a number that's really low and sounds really great, you might really want to go talk to friends about have they used that company, because the odds are you're getting what you pay for. Back to the survey real quick. So the complete survey is still up. I'm doing this presentation again at Secure WV in about a month. So, if you haven't done the survey, please feel free to grab the link, go take the survey, add your data. I plan on sometime probably late November or sometime in December actually sitting down and going through, because I'm too cheap to pay SurveyMonkey to manipulate data for me, to actually go in and manually pull data out. The data set's not gotten quite too large to manage yet. Might regret saying that when I go home and there's like 400 responses. So results I saw were a little different from my expectations, but I have a couple of theories on that. One is I think it's largely influenced by my network and my extended network. I mean, my way of distributing this was to tweet it out, put it on Facebook, have people use social media to kind of distribute it. And I think, that's going to, influence a lot of the results, because I have a finite set of friends, right? And the other side is the people I fear that are flooding the industry probably don't take polls like this. And again, a lot of those same people probably don't follow me. They may follow some of my friends, but they don't follow me. I'm not that important. Why I still believe I'm right. So this is just one of the tweets. I couldn't find the other tweet because there's another good example about a week or so ago. So I don't know how many people saw this. I know a couple people retweeted it. Basically, somebody put up a feed on LinkedIn that was asking people, hey, I want to create a group, a WhatsApp group for folks to communicate, like all these, for SOC analysts and stuff to get together and communicate, and said, PM me. And then in the public comments that everyone can read are their phone numbers for every one of them. So it's just like, these are people who work in security and probably claim to have some amount of security knowledge, and they're just, they clearly said in the message, like I read it like twice to make sure I wasn't going nuts, PM me, and people put it in the public comments. So, there was another one about where they asked a very basic technical question, and I was kind of like, shouldn't you know that if you're doing the job that you claim you're doing? That was one of the big things when I was interviewing people, especially from UMUC and UMBC, which is University of Maryland, Baltimore County. These cyber experts that I was interviewing a lot of couldn't answer for me basic like network, like topology and design questions. And I'm like, how are you supposed to help defend and secure this network with your cyber degree if you don't know how networks work? That was one that really bugged me back when I was actually interviewing people. So I want to get into kind of the perceptions, expectations, and realities of working in the field. Hit the button. There we go. So my life as a pen tester / hacker. What my mom, yes, and that is so true. What my mom thinks I do. She basically thinks I'm authenticating. Yes, thank God. My friends think I spend most of my day playing around on computers and playing games. My mom thinks I, basically, work at Geek Squad. The media is pretty much convinced anyone who's labeled as a hacker is, working for Anonymous. Donald Trump thinks that's me. Granted, I am 400 pounds, but you know what? Suck it. What I think I do is spend all day popping shells and doing awesome shit, and then what I really do is spend a lot of my time staring at my computer and writing reports. Right? There's so much of my job that is spent writing reports. I've heard stories of people who, they're like, oh, I want to go be a pen tester, and then they're like, they go through and they do all the fun stuff, and they're like, I have to write a report? Yeah. And guess what? You're gonna have to probably present it to somebody too, and explain it. So it's that sort of skill that's actually very much lacking, because I think a lot of what the expectations aren't necessarily always set, right? People see one thing, but get a totally different thing when they get into work. And so I don't know if that's a failure of education or if it's just people with blinders on who only see what they want to see. But like I said, you saw that ad from UMUC. They make it sound amazing and awesome, right? And the jobs are in cyber, but it's, but really, are they setting that expectation of what these people are really going to be doing when they're working out there? And I don't think a lot do. I'm sure some are. I'm sure some of them do a magnificent job. I would actually have pretty good faith that that some of the people doing the digital forensics courses up at Marshall, who are getting, have good teachers like Bill Gardner, are actually learning what they need to learn and know, guess what? You're going to do all this fun shit and you're going to forensicate things all day and love it. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go write a report and present it to somebody. Whereas,
And I'll tell you, that is where the education system is falling on its ass.
Yep.
I'm 34 years in the industry. I see a lot of stuff written, and I tell you what, people coming out of college today should not write to save their soul.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah.
String 3 thoughts together in a coherent paragraph and present it, and you can be the greatest pen tester or anything else, and analyst in the world, but if you cannot communicate
Yep.
on a piece of paper what it is you found, it's a failure.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. the education system definitely has a gap that's being missed with that. And what I'll say is, and part of the reason why I historically love candidates in the field who are, oh yay, phone, go somewhere else. My own phone rang during my presentation. Part of the reason, yes, part of the reason why I love people who went to school and have degrees in engineering is because if nothing else, every engineer has taken at least one technical writing course. And when I got my degree, I took 2, plus a third if you count the senior design project that was required at Ohio State. So there's a lot of, I always saw people who had the technical skill, the knowledge, they could learn, because trust me, if you can learn some of the crap that you have to learn in some of the engineering programs, you can learn cybersecurity. And they had the ability to write. They could make concise ideas that were technically sound and put them on paper in a way most people could understand. Sometimes you have to kind of help tweak them and explain, yeah, this is, this isn't gonna be clear enough to an executive, but you have to explain it to almost anybody who ever writes anything, because until you've written something for an executive the first time, what makes perfectly clear sense to you will make no sense to them. So it's one of those, that's very much a learned skill, but if you can't even write, clear, concise thought at a level that another engineer could understand, you're never going to be able to write for the CEO. Yeah. Right.
And that doesn't mean you have a story, you don't have to have a story, but you have to be able to clearly explain what it is you did, and that's whether or not you're a pen tester, intelligence analyst, first level analyst, or whatever.
Right.
I think aside from this also what you're talking about, the ability to present well
Right.
is also
Yeah.
not understood. A good presentation tells a story. It
Yeah.
takes you from point A to point B. It's the same thing.
Exactly. And, that's one of the things, so I'll freely admit one of the things I used to really suck at was presenting. I used to hate doing it. I hated getting up and having to talk to in front of people. That's a big part of the reason I started presenting at conferences. It's first off, if I fuck up, it's not going to cost my company money or cost me money. And secondly, it's a good primer for working with a room, right? I can interacting, paying attention, and doing those sorts of things, because I very much used to, when I'd go through a presentation, be head down, focus on the screen. So if somebody had a question, I may not see it for 5 minutes, and then we're having to stream back and go back to an old train of thought. So, it's definitely one of those things, and there's skills that can be developed. There's very few people who will never be able to present in front of a group of people. There are just some people who will be epically bad at it. But it's a skill that, people need to learn, and I don't know that there's enough of it. Honestly, that's one thing I didn't get in college, right? We never really had to do a huge presentation of our ideas. Maybe in some of the, elective courses I took where you had to do some presentation of some type, but from a technical perspective, I think I did one in all of college. So it was very minimalist. So perceptions. Just a little bit of interactive time. Yay. So, what kind of, I wanted to kind of feel out, you guys saw some of the stuff I had in the last slides. How do you guys, think that your friends and family view your education, your profession? I mean, how many people do you think actually understand, that you actually interact with on a daily basis, understand what you do, versus how you think the media perceives a lot of what we do, especially if you identify more as a hacker? Anybody want to chime in?
This is a talk in and of itself. This slide
Yes.
is an entire
Oh, yeah.
45 minutes.
There's a reason why I've only got 20-something, 30-something slides in here, because I fully expected this to be a lot of question and answer, because I don't want to pretend that I am going to be the know-it-all. And if there's a lot of people in the room who have experience and a lot of people who are trying to get into the field, then this can be at least a talking away for people to bounce off and hear other people's ideas. Some of it may confirm what I say. Some people may think I'm a total idiot, but that's okay. Yeah.
All right, one perception I do see in the media and in politics in general is, well, we all know that hackers are considerably talented people, and it's not just exclusively hackers, but there are millions of people in the world with their own
Right, and so, what our friend back there just said is, that there is this perception in the media that, that a lot of people get that, hackers are magicians and can do a lot of stuff that we really can't. I think a big part of that is really bad films, which are the only thing that most people ever see with regards to what an hacker actually does, right? They've got that perception, and that's what they feel like we do. Now, granted, there's media now that does a far better job. Shows like Mr. Robot that actually try to be somewhat more realistic from a tech perspective, though, I don't know how much from a life and real life perspective that's real, but it's far more technologically real. Yeah.
The media, in many ways, going back a long time, starting with the first major one that I recall was Top Gun, where they said, basically there's a gap in this knowledge space or in this participant space. We need people, so let's make this look really cool. Don't worry about how much training that you have to be a certain body weight and meet all the other characteristics, but we need people in this field. And so the same thing can be said for any major field. They make a really cool movie about it.
Yep.
In China, it's the Police Story series. Because they were running out in Hong Kong, they had a lack of people who were signing up to their police academy. Jackie Chan goes and makes a very popular film about it, makes a series of films, they get an influx of people. I'm not saying it's a direct correlation, I believe it is an indirect, but I believe that it actually is true. Forensic sciences took a major step up with a TV show that came out in the early 2000s that could never find a light switch. People signed up in droves to become something that actually forensic science.
So that's another good point, right? So he talks about the forensic science and the 8,000 versions of CSI, and including CSI Cyber. So. Right, and so it is. It's got a lot of the same goal. And so what's funny is after those shows came out, I recall seeing a lot of the same universities doing ads for forensic, become forensic examiner programs. And they created commercials that looked a lot like the TV show. And there were probably forensic examiners all over the country who were at conferences just like this saying, what the hell are they doing showing this on TV? This is not how any of this works. So I think that's a very good point. And here's what I'm going to say. People can rail on me all they want, and I'm not talking about, I don't want to reference badly about anybody in this room, but if you see one of these commercials, or any commercial for a degree program, and it is from, the ITT doesn't exist anymore, but DeVry, University of Phoenix, any of these for-profit universities, take it for a grain of salt, because in the end, the only thing they are looking for is their bottom dollar. If you're getting this from actual public institutions, you can look at it a little more, but look at it with a little bit askew, because the reality is some of what they say may be true, but again, they still need to get money in the door. But their desire is slightly less that, I would say, of a for-profit university.
Back to the point, isn't there a gap, a lack of people involved in the space? That's what I was really getting at.
Yeah.
Isn't this a cry out for people to come participate? The problem is that they're not telling you the truth about what you're getting involved in.
Yeah, I mean, and that is true, right? They're saying there's a lot of jobs, and don't get me wrong, there are. Go online and look. You will find dozens, hundreds, thousands of jobs depending on where you live. Unless you live in a really, really small town, you're going to see a lot of jobs for information security. And it's not going to be hard to find. Like my personal perceptions, there are a lot of new jobs in Infosec. There are also a lot of underqualified candidates. I see this a lot in areas with a high demand. You see people who went from one thing to something totally unrelated, and they either got into it for a lot of the same reasons we're talking about now about the perceptions, or they got into it for the other reason I have listed here, which is they see money. And if anybody thinks that this isn't happening and that I'm just crazy, please let me know. But I'm going to give you my story now. I went to college in the early 2000s during the .com bubble. I went into double E, but I had to, since I was doing a computer specialization, I had to take a lot of computer science. And I can tell you for a fact, I saw a lot of people who were in that program because they saw dollar signs. They saw the money, they saw the .com bubble, and they all said, I can go in here, I can either make something or I can learn a skill that I can then go for one of these jobs that has, everything all those .coms had, right? They had video games and ping pong tables and people showing up when they wanted to, right? So it's one of those things where a lot of people saw that, and then I saw a lot of people changing majors because the bubble burst while we were in college, near the end, but it did burst. And so that's just it. There's always going to be a certain group of people whose primary driving factor is going to be the dollar signs. All my perceptions aren't negative, I swear. We do have a community that largely respects the field, and we see that at conferences like this. And there's a lot of people who are getting exhaustion and fatigue of all the security because that's what we cover so much in the news now. Yeah.
Hey, Joey, just like you had a slide pricing factor, don't need to go
Yep.
into it. You're talking about all the different companies. It's just like with the car companies, aerospace companies, or even computer companies. They crop up like weeds and then slowly pare down to, a handful.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing I saw, I don't know if Dave experienced this, but back in '95 when I got into IT, if you could spell computer, you could get a job.
Yeah.
And eventually though, the people with real skills stayed, and the people who didn't have skills, they're doing something else now.
Right.
And that's what's gonna happen, I think.
Right.
You get all these people coming into information security, they can't hack it, and blah-blah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's, you got people who address it as a trade to learn versus a career.
Right.
And I'm looking at bullet number 2, lots of underqualified candidates. And I probably spent the last year and a half, it took me a year and a half to fill 3 headcounts on my team, 2 headcounts on my counterpart's team. And the least qualified people are the ones who have degrees and certifications, actually. Because they lack experience and they lack know-how.
Yep.
And they lack the ability to put hands on a keyboard.
Yeah.
Like you would need a real analyst or a real developer to actually
Yeah.
do. And that's really kind of fascinating to me, is, you crank out a degreed person, whatever the fuck that means, right?
Yeah.
And it's a person who's actually got a master's degree, and he's got this, he's got this, and he's got certifications in all these different areas. You ask him to sit down and put his hands on the keyboard or her hands on the keyboard, pop a box, run some tools, show me how you script, write a story for me, present
Yeah.
this, nothing.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
At the end of the day, I will hire a smart, aggressive person who knows how to think and who knows how to present minimally and do a little bit of writing before I will hire anybody with a certification.
Oh no, and I fully agree with that. I saw lots of bad, people with certs, people with degrees in cyber, where they are. You do get these people who, you look at it. Go look at job listings, like they want CISPs and CEHs and fucking every other SANS cert, and it's like they don't and then they want all that, and they're like, we want 0 to 2 years experience. I'm like, well, first off, you can't get the CISP until you've got at least 5. So it's like, and secondly, if you're using that as a deciding factor, you're nuts. I have a CISP. My name is Joey, and I have a CISP. I only have it, but no, seriously, I only got it because my company forced me to. I hate certifications, right? I mean, I see that a lot, and some certification programs are better than others, but I don't like them, and I don't like it when organizations treat them as end-all be-alls.
You ultimately have to know what it is you're looking for and the kind of people you need to execute what you want to do. Right?
Yep.
Here's a little disclosure for you. I work for Intel Security. I do not have a degree in computer security. I do not know how to code. I do know how to do intelligence. I do know how to produce intelligence. The last 3 people I hired for my team have no background in computer security. They have backgrounds in producing intelligence.
Right.
They're credentialed intelligence professionals. You want a real good hacker? You want a real good security professional? Hire a trained
Yep.
intelligence analyst. You have to know what you're looking for, where you want to go to, and the kind of people who can do the job.
Right. Yep.
I was just gonna have, basically, definitely agree with you and Joey on that. Part of the issue we have with getting skilled enough people, and not finding skilled enough people for the positions we want, then we're getting pretty broad in our skills, especially in consulting. Because then he's gonna say, oh, I need you, I got to really come in, but he can write, he can't write. He can, one of you, I'm sorry. That's how I think.
Okay. I love taking questions. I'm going to try to tear through these because I have 5 minutes left, and I think I got about 10 slides left.
Keep control of your presentation, sir.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally lost control of the crowd. Damn it. So what is perception, right? We talked about the headlines we see. We talk about how it influences people's their views on security. It also changes their views on how they view risk. If you go, there's a great talk from DerbyCon about 2 years ago. I can't remember the guy's name now. That he gave about people's perception on risk. It's a great talk. I'd go back and look for it. I think one of the greatest risks to our field is the perception. How do people see what we're doing? How do people feel if their data is safe? Do they pay attention to breaches? The answer is, for the most part, no. That was a whole talk into itself that I haven't gotten finished yet. So expectations. We've talked a lot about this, right? About setting expectations for what people are expecting, right? When I first started in Infosec, I had no clue what to expect. It was technically my second job out of school. My first one was working at the U.S. Patent Office, so working in compliance seemed exciting. Yeah, working. Yeah, I know. Back in the day, it wasn't in the news near as much as it was now, right? 10 years ago, sure, security stories came up every now and then. We still had information security conferences back then. DEF CON was still a thing back then. Conferences like ShmooCon were just starting out back then. They did exist, but the reality is it wasn't as big as it is today, where we've got a conference every other weekend and we're always talking, and even if we're just going into the echo chamber and yelling at each other about it. Conferences became an outlet for me in a large way. That's actually how I wound up getting out of compliance, was building a network of people, meeting people. And became focused on so that's when I became focused on wanting to do pen tests. It sounded exciting, it sounded fun, and I was already writing so many reports, it didn't matter. Anything would be less than the number of reports I was writing then. So what are my expectations kind of going forward from that? Like I said, I've managed twice. I enjoy doing it. Part of the reason I took the job I'm in now is because I knew I was going to get to grow and build a team. That's a big part of the reason I took it. I'm very selective about mentoring because you have to show some level of initiative before I'm going to take somebody and mentor them. I've seen a lot of people who just want it handed to them. Management, I don't hate it most of the time. It's the HR side I hate more than anything, but I enjoy working with the people and doing that side of it. And I also believe that there's more influence that can be had the higher up you are. I think the problem is a lot of our really smart, really talented people want to stay technical because they don't want to stop being technical. And so we wind up with CISOs and executives who don't have that level of knowledge and that institutional knowledge that's down at the lower weeds. And so, I think that's a big part of it. For me is I feel like moving up, I feel like it's a thing I can handle, and that, I will take the bullet for everybody else so all of you can keep doing amazing technical work. Right, and I've seen companies like that they'll have managerial leader, technical leader. I mean, Cisco has the same thing. They've got their equivalent of an executive, the senior scientist, who I've heard can pretty much do whatever the hell they want. My current company, I love like I said, it's a small security team. Our CISO is still very technical, and he understands what we're dealing with and those sorts of things. I couldn't imagine working for somebody who didn't understand that. I haven't had to deal with it too much, but I definitely see, I see him running into those walls sometimes dealing with the other executive team members. So, realities. There is a lot of fun. Trust me, I get to pop shells during the day. I love what I do. I get to have a great time. I get to come to conferences. DerbyCon, SkyDogCon, ShmooCon, dozens, hundreds of B-Sides events, and there's so many more. There's tons of others I go to that apparently don't have logos, so... but there's a lot more work, right? I still have to go to meetings. I still have to do reports. I have to, there's sometimes the research side of things can be dull to me. And by research, I mean like the prep work for getting ready to do, yeah. And there are days where I pretty much do what that robot's doing. I should make that robot so I don't have to do it myself. So to close out, because I am running out of time, I want to give thanks to SkyDogCon, to everyone who's taken the survey, and everyone who retweeted to give me all the responses, particularly B-Sides Las Vegas, who until they retweeted me, I had like 29 responses. Like the next day, I had 40 more responses. So their retweet alone got me most of my responses. I would take questions, but we're running out of time, and we did a lot of discussion anyway. And you can find me afterwards. I'm going to be here. There's my contact information, my Twitter handle, my email address that I use for all this stuff. You can come find me at a bar or come find me over at the coffee table because I'll be drinking a lot more coffee today. Ask me questions. I'd love to talk to people. If you're looking to get in the field and you are looking for work, if you want to work as a pen tester, I am looking for a junior pen tester. So come find me while I'm here. It'd probably be just as good as some of the other ones I've run into. So yeah, there's too much swearing. I mean, this has been a very mild talk from a swear perspective. So I'm pretty sure I'm out of time. So if you guys have any questions, just come find me. I'll either be at CouchCon or running around. Hit me up on Twitter. But thank you, everybody.